Can love become an act of rebellion? For Michal, daughter of the king of Israel, loving a man meant challenging his own father, risking his position, and immersing himself in a destiny that would change the story. Since he was born, his future was drawn. As a princess, her life had to revolve around political alliances, not feelings. But then he appeared. He was not a prince or a nobleman of high crib. He was a simple pastor turned into guerrero, a man whose courage was already resonating among the people, David. At first, it was only a name among many. The young man who defeated the giant, the hero who had brought glory to Israel. But for King Saul, David was a growing problem, a threat to his throne. And for Michal, he was something else. The love that was born in his heart was not a simple attraction. It was a dangerous flame, a link that would become its greatest challenge. While the tension in the court grew, while his father sank into paranoia and resentment, Michal made an unthinkable decision for a king's daughter. He chose David. But loving an enemy of the king had a price. The palace was filled with rumors. Michal saw the way his father looked at David, like a man who observes his own shadow growing too big. Saul's initial admiration had become envy. Her love for David placed her in the crossfire of a conflict she could not control. And then the threat became real. Saul no longer supported David's presence in his kingdom, ordered his capture, his execution. The death of the one whom Michal loved had become a sentence signed by his own father. But Michal was not going to allow it. Time was exhausted. David had to flee that same night or would never see the sunlight again. And at that time, when fate already seemed sealed, Michal made the most dangerous decision of his life. The night had fallen on the palace, but within its walls, the danger was slipped like an invisible shadow. Saul had made his decision. David had to die. Michal heard the steps of the soldiers approaching. There was no time. If I doubted a single moment, everything would be lost. David slept, without knowing that death was already coming for him. It was at that time that Michal became more than a princess. He became a rebel. The Bible tells us in 1 Samuel 19:11-12 that Michal helped David escape through the window before the guards catch him. But what does not tell us the text? Some interpretations suggest that his act was more than a betrayal of the king. It was a challenge to the established order. Could a woman challenge the will of a king and go unpunished? Michal not only helped David flee, he cheated his own father's soldiers. The Bible says that he placed an idol in bed, covering it with blankets to look like her sick husband, of 1 Samuel 19:13. But here, an intriguing question arises. Why did Michal have an idol at home? Some suggest that this idol, called teraphim, was used in protection rituals. Could Michal have used old beliefs to protect David? Or is there anything else in this story that they never told us? When the soldiers returned with the news that David was sick, Saul ordered them to bring him in his own bed to kill him. It was then that his deception was exposed. His father looked at her furious. How could your own daughter betray it that way? But what Saul didn't know was that his greatest enemy was already far. David had escaped, and with him, his destiny had changed forever. But Michal's betrayal had a price. The king did not easily forgive, and she was about to discover it. Michal's betrayal was not unpunished. David was safe, but she didn't. Saul was not a man who forgot, much less when disobedience came from his own blood. The Bible does not tell us what happened in the following days, but in 1 Samuel 25:44, we found a disturbing event. Michal was given in marriage to another man, Paltiel, son of Lais. There was no option. There was no farewell. Was it punishment or strategy? Some believe that Saul used it as a political piece, separating her from David to ensure that her dynasty had no connections with the future king of Israel. But others suggest that this act was more cruel than we imagined. In the culture of the time, a woman who was given to another man after having been married to someone more rarely recovered her honor. Michal went from being Israel's most feared wife to the forgotten woman in an imposed marriage. But does Michal really end there? Archaeological stories show that in ancient Canaan, real marriages were not only political alliances, but ways to control lineage and power. Was Michal a victim of this system? Or did Saul give her hoping her story? Meanwhile, David was in the desert, gathering men, strengthening himself. He didn't look for her. The Bible mentions that at that time it took other wives, such as Abigail and Ahinoam, 1 Samuel 25, 42-43. But Michal was still alive. When Saul's reign finally came to an end and David mounted to the throne, something unexpected happened. David did not forget Michal, and his destiny was not yet sealed. But when the past returns, he does it with scars. And Michal was about to face the return of a husband who was no longer the same man who had fallen in love. Notice spread like fire in a dry field. Saul was dead. His reign had come to an end on the battlefield, and with him the dynasty that Israel had once ruled. But in the shadows of this fall, an ancient story was not yet finished. David was now king, and with his rise to the throne, the pieces of the past began to move. He had waited for years for this moment, consolidating his power, ensuring his domain. But before establishing his kingdom, there was something that he had to recover. Michal in 2 Samuel 3, 13-16, David demanded that Michal be returned. But here a disturbing question arises. Why? Was it love? Was it justice? Or was it something else? Some believe that Michal, as Saul's daughter, had a strategic value. Recovering it meant affirming its authority over the previous royal house. In ancient times, real marriages were more than sentimental ties. They were symbols of power. By bringing Michal back, David not only recovered his wife, but consolidated his right over Israel. But the scene that the Bible reveals to us is heartbreaking. Michal was not consulted. He had no option. They took her from Paltiel's arms, her husband, and took her to Jerusalem. And here we found one of the most shocking images. Paltiel walked behind her, crying, until he was forced to return. Was Michal a war trophy? Or was it a woman trapped between two men, used as a piece of a political game? If this story was forgotten, how many more have been silenced? Lead your like and subscribe to discover the hidden truths of the Bible. David claimed her. But what she didn't know was that the man she returned was no longer the young warrior she had loved, because Michal returned not to a husband, but to a king. And what I expected in Jerusalem was a future that no one could have anticipated. The Michal who returned to Jerusalem was not the same woman who had helped David escape that night. The years of exile had hardened her, and when she returned to the palace, she did not find the young warrior she had fallen in love, but to a king who no longer saw her as before. David had changed. His life was full of new wives, new alliances, a kingdom that now revolved around his figure. Michal was no longer essential, but if they thought it would be silent, they were wrong. The tension between them grew to the day the story took an unexpected turn. In 2 Samuel 6, 14-16, David brought the Ark of the Alliance to Jerusalem. The moment was sacred, an event that would mark his government as an anointed king by God. But what impacted Michal the most was the greatness of the occasion, but her husband's behavior. David danced, not like a monarch, but as a man of the people. His real clothes were left aside, and he gave himself completely to the celebration, regardless of the protocol, without worrying about the dignity that a king should maintain. From a palace window, Michal saw it, and despised him in his heart. Because here we enter a mystery that few speak. Some believe that Michal still loaded his father's blood, Saul, the first king of Israel, an imposing man who would have never shown such a lack of solemnity. Others suggest that his contempt went beyond royalty. It was the pain of a woman who had been forgotten. But there is an even darker theory. Some apocryphal and studies texts suggest that the conflict between Michal and David had deeper roots. Was Your contempt only for pride? Or was there anything in the Ark of the Alliance, in the cult that was given, that Michal did not accept? Did Michal know something that others ignored? What the Bible tells us is that its confrontation with David was not left without consequences. The words he spoke seal his destiny. And after that day, Michal's story was never the same again. The echo of the discussion between Michal and David still floated in the air of the palace. The words had been thrown as invisible swords, and the wound they left would never heal. But behind that conflict, there was something much bigger. It was not just a fight between husband and wife, but a clash between two lineages, two kingdoms, two visions of Israel's destiny. Michal was Saul's daughter, the first king of Israel, the man who had been chosen by God, but also the man that God had rejected. In 1 Samuel 15:26, the prophet Samuel said, "Jehovah has discarded you so that you are not king over Israel." Since then Saul's house was marked by the fall, but did that curse also fallen on his daughter? Instead, David was the anointed, the new one chosen by God. But was it really just a divine choice? Some scholars believe that the rivalry between the houses of Saul and David was not only a spiritual issue, but a much deeper political and territorial conflict. Archaeological records have revealed that at the time of Saul, the kingdom of Israel was still in its initial stage with a more tribal structure. While David's government was the one that really consolidated a unified kingdom, did this mean that David represented the future and Michal the past? In 2 Samuel 6:23, it is mentioned that Michal never had children. But here there is something intriguing. Some ancient manuscripts suggest that Michal did have offspring, but that it was eliminated for political reasons. Was the lack of children a punishment? Or was it an intentional decision to erase any link with Saul's house? The conflict between both lineages did not end with them. Years later, Saul's descendants were persecuted and executed in David's time. Was it only revenge, or a strategy to eliminate any threat to the throne? Michal was Saul's last direct heiress in the royal court, and after his fall, his father's house was completely eradicated. But his story was not over yet, because when a woman is silenced, what is hidden in her shadow can be even more scary. Michal's name began to fade in the halls of the palace. If the daughter of the first king of Israel and the wife of the second became a ghost in her own home, it was not banished, it was not executed, but there was even worse punishment: oblivion. In 2 Samuel 6:23, the Bible mentions that Michal never had children. This statement has generated one of the greatest mysteries in its history. Was he really sterile? Or was there anything else behind those words? Some theories suggest that the phrase is not literal. In the culture of the time, a woman without children was considered insignificant, as if her existence had no purpose. For many, Michal did not lose only the possibility of being a mother, but her place in history. But there is something even more disturbing. In 2 Samuel 21:8, it is mentioned that 5 Michal children were delivered to be executed. However, in some more recent manuscripts, his name was changed to that of Merab, his sister. Was it a copy of the copyists, or perhaps their offspring was eliminated and its name intentionally erased? Archaeology has revealed that in ancient Canaan, the official records of the kingdoms often rewritten the story to favor the rulers. Could David have done the same with Michal? Did you eliminate any trace of your lineage to ensure that your throne was not disputed? Michal was one of the few women in the Bible who dared to publicly challenge a king. But the story is rarely kind to women who do not submit. The truth is that after his confrontation with David, his name ceased to be mentioned. It is not known when he died or how. It simply disappeared. But was it really forgotten? Because in history, when a name is erased, it is because there is something they don't want us to know. Michal's name vanished from biblical stories, but his shadow still persists in the questions that no one dares to do. Why does your story seem incomplete? What happened to the woman who once challenged a king and who, from one moment to another, disappeared from the records? In the Bible, women's names are often reduced to short, fragmented mentions, as if their role were secondary. But in the case of Michal, his silence is too loud. The scriptures tell us how it helped David escape, how she was delivered to another man, and how she was finally claimed as a piece of power. But after his confrontation with the king, his story simply goes out. Some believe that the absence of details about their destiny is an intentional omission. The Bible mentions the fall of Saul's house, the consolidation of the kingdom of David, and the alliances that secured his lineage. But what happened to Michal in all this process? There are theories that suggest that their disappearance was more political than personal. If Michal represented the last vestige of Saul's lineage, then his very existence was a threat. Could he have been separated from the stories to erase his influence on the history of Israel? At present, it is not strange to see how official narratives omit certain details, manipulating history at convenience. Could it be that the same happened with Michal? Some more radical interpretations claim that her story is that of a punished woman, not only for challenging a king, but for daring to be an authority figure in a society that was not ready for it. Was Michal's true crime not remain silent? But there is even more. Some ancient manuscripts and extra-biblical texts mention powerful women whose stories were suppressed. Is one of them Michal? Maybe his destiny was not oblivion. Perhaps its story is still hidden, waiting to be discovered. Because when a name disappears from history, it is not because it has ceased to exist, but because someone wanted us to forget it. Michal was not the first woman to be silenced, and it wasn't the last one. Throughout the biblical history, names disappeared, stories were shortened, voices were turned off. But if we look carefully, we find traces of them, fragments that still resist the passage of time. Michal was the daughter of a king and wife of another. It belonged to royalty, had power, influence, and a crucial role in the history of Israel. But still, it was eliminated from the stories, reduced to a secondary character, its destination wrapped in mystery. How many more shared their same destiny? The Bible mentions many women whose names have been forgotten or whose stories were told from the perspective of the men around them. Noah's wife, Pharaoh's daughter who adopted Moses, Cain's wife, Samson's mother, women who were key in crucial events but whose voices vanished in the story. Some, like Deborah and Jael, managed to escape from silence, but others never had that opportunity. Was this a simple omission or an intentional decision? In a society where genealogy and lineage were fundamental, what meant to erase a woman from history? Michal represents all these women. Those that were brave, those that challenged power, those who loved and protected, but which in the end were relegated to oblivion. However, time does not erase the truth completely. The echoes of their history still resonate, hidden between the lines, hoping to be rediscovered. Because maybe in some corner of history, Michal's name is still alive, waiting for the time to be remembered. Time buried Michal's name in the shadows of history. His voice was silenced, his ignored legacy, his sealed destiny. She was a princess who challenged a king, a wife who protected her husband, a woman who lived between power and abandonment, but who remembers its story today. He did not die in a battle. It was not executed. It simply disappeared. Its name is mentioned, but its end is not counted. We do not know how his last days were or what he felt when he saw his lineage fade in time. The Bible mentions it for the last time, and then silence. But here is the most disturbing. It wasn't just Michal. In the history of mankind, the women who challenged their destiny, who broke with the established, who refused to be controlled, were erased, forgotten, reduced to footnotes in the stories of others. Maybe we will never know the full version of its history, but that does not mean that its existence has not had a purpose. Because even those whose names have been forgotten left traces in history. And here the most important question arises: how many stories like Michal have we forgotten? How many lives were silenced because they bothered those who wrote the stories? How many people, even today, are relegated to forgetting what is established? Maybe Michal never had the opportunity to change his destiny, but we do, because there is something that neither time nor men can erase. The truth always finds a way to come to light. And perhaps, after centuries in the dark, today is the day when its history is counted again. Michal challenged his destiny but was forgotten. How many more stories have been buried in history? Perhaps today is the day his voice is heard again. Share this video with someone who needs to know this truth and join our community to continue revealing the hidden mysteries of the Bible.